I'm back. Hope everybody is well, and apologies for my disappearance for quite some time, but it was unfortunately due to a very painful family bereavement, the pain of which one cannot even quantify, but hopefully that's in the past. Now I wanted to talk about the entire spectacle which took place on Saturday. Sometimes it's better not to record an immediate reaction video, as emotions are still extremely high, and we're all passionate, about the sport. Certain fighters or components that we see within the card that, disgust us. So it's wise to wait a few days to rewatch the fight, as it can be very difficult to score a fight real time. Try and ignore the rest of the community, not to, engage with others on podcasts. And that's exactly what I do, and that's generally my normal routine. I'll watch the fight in slow motion and always compile my own stats. Try and look at the fight objectively, from an independent perspective, not having no vested interest in either fighter or fighters on the night. And now I'm in a position to relay my thoughts, which a lot of you have been asking for. And what I would say is that the pay-per-view card was one of the most disgusting boxing spectacles that I've seen in many a year. The Premier Boxing Champions, the abbreviation should really be PBC, Pervasive Boxing Corruption. And we saw yet another installment of premeditated corruption to an extent which even shocked me, because the precursor was not even the main event. The precursor for what was going to happen in the main event was on one of the undercard fights, where a PBC fighter in Mario Barrios at super lightweight, who's been wrapped in cotton wool and given bum after bum, groomed to be a champion. And you could hear it very early on the PBC telecast from a couple of years ago. He was bestowed the WBA Super Lightweight Championship by unanimous decision. A horrible decision, and you've only got to look at reactions of guys like former world champion Michael Mora. He fought an Uzbek, a very good southpaw from Uzbekistan, Batir Akhmedov, who, despite suffering 2 flash knockdowns, pretty much dominated the fight throughout. Hurt Mario Barrios repeatedly. Better inside work, better jab. Just an overall much better fighter. The pressure he induced on Barrios throughout the fight was fantastic. Just indomitable spirit, desperate to win that world title. Made a couple of mistakes, suffered a couple of flash knockdowns, and that's the PBC's justification for rewarding their fighter with a victory who did pretty much nothing through the residual parts of the fight. So once that fight had concluded, my thoughts on what was going to transpire in the main event had just been crystallized. Now, Shawn Porter and Errol Spence. Errol Spence winning the fight by split decision. An absolutely outrageous decision. I'm absolutely disgusted to this point, and I will attempt to explain why the decision is incorrect, and all of those stats that 95% of you who are infiltrated by a combination of CompuBox and biased commentators who clearly have an agenda for the A side, the home fighter. It's the same traits we see over and over again. We saw it in the Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao fight, where Floyd Mayweather clearly did not win that fight, but the level of neolithic incompetence and stupidity from the YouTube community is just it's at a level in which I really don't want to engage or interact with the rest of you, because you're not really worthy of any interaction, such as your gullibility and your stupidity. But let's get into this fight now. Shawn Porter. Now, let's go back a little bit. Errol Spence was a huge betting favourite for a unification fight. He was anywhere from 4-1 to 8-1. He was already on the pound-for-pound list. In fact, he was elevated to the pound-for-pound list after the Chris Algieri fight. That's how much of a commodity. That's how much of this has been a project, the PBC project, on the back of a recommendation from Floyd Mayweather for Errol Spence to be the next chosen star of the PBC, because Al Heyman is clearly trying to create another pay-per-view star, because he has failed to do so thus far. Having literally embezzled $1 billion with no fiduciary responsibility to all of those investors who provided funds. But that's for another day. They were desperate to make Errol Spence a pay-per-view star who had no pedigree, no amateur, a very modest amateur career. Really done by Floyd Mayweather's, recommendations to Al Heyman, on the back of sparring sessions at the Mayweather gym. Who knows what really transpired, but I guess Al was grateful to Floyd, because Floyd really made Al. Al didn't make Floyd. So, so that the loyalty and the solidarity between the two, so they pushed Errol Spence into his first major pay-per-view with Mikey Garcia, who was brought up in 2 weight divisions, brought in as the sacrificial lamb. Mikey's proclivity was money, so he received his $8 million. And it was an experiment for Errol Spence to try and absorb Mikey Garcia's much larger Mexican fan base, to try and make him into a pay-per-view star. So superficially, the numbers can look fantastic. 51,000 watching the fight in Texas, which you've got to remember is literally on the Mexican border. So if you really dissect the demographics and look at what percentage were present at the fight and what percentage bought the pay-per-view, it was very much the Hispanic demographics. So it wasn't the Errol Spence fans, but the pro Errol Spence and the PBC will never really make that demarcation, because because they're uneducated. So Spence and Porter, the next pay-per-view fight. Well, it has to be, they've set that precedence now. And Shawn Porter, who's never really been given much of a backing by the PBC. There's been various altercations we hear in the background between the Porter family and Al Heyman. Such an underrated fighter. It's been given bad decisions, certainly against Keith Thurman, which was a terrible decision. Lost his fight to Kell Brook in a very close fight. Could have gone either way. So he was an 8-1 underdog in a unification fight. Never been on the pound for pound list, despite having a much better resume than Errol Spence, who's done absolutely fuck all in his career. A win against Kell Brook, but a Kell Brook coming back from a defeat against Gennady Golovkin, coming back down from 160 pounds, had to lose a lot of muscle weight, as well as the 40-50 pounds he generally balloons in terms of water weight and fat. So Kell Brook's durability in the second half of the fight, after dominating 5 of the first 6 rounds, he began to deplete rapidly, and Errol Spence took over the fight. So that's a very hollow, superficial victory. He got the stoppage, but Kell Brook voluntarily took knees in those fights. And yes, he definitely did quit, but he wasn't knocked out or anything. He just ran out of steam. Now, Shawn Porter in this fight was able to neutralize Errol Spence's jab from long range with ease. And this is Errol Spence, who's been described as having one of the best jabs in boxing from many of the weight classes, who controlled Mikey Garcia with the jab, throws hundreds of jabs. And Shawn Porter, what did he do? This is how he neutralized it. A non-stationary target from long range, very bouncy, athletic up on his feet, weaving, using combination of 2 prone feints, and then acceleration, quick acceleration, 2 free steps, then weaving to get underneath Errol's own jab, and then jab, sidestep, jab, landing consecutive, double, triple jabbing, then pushing Errol back, and then winging away with, looping sort of right hands, left hands to the body. And he did that for the first half of the fight, in which he absolutely dominated. Errol Spence had no answer. Now, Shawn Porter, I think it was better for him to actually fight a southpaw, because Shawn Porter's kryptonite, the fighters that have given him the most problems, have been orthodox fighters, specifically counterpunchers who have one specific weapon which has given him a lot of trouble in the past, and that is the counter straight right hand. Now, Kell Brook exemplified that perfectly in that fight. Now, Kell Brook, for all of the sort of polarizing opinion about him, Kell Brook is an excellent sharpshooter from mid-range, who probably still has, one of the best, aesthetically even, but one of the best right hands in world boxing. It's a beautiful right hand where he doesn't have much backlift, and his right elbow doesn't go out to a 90-degree point in which the opposition fighter can actually see it. So it's very well disguised. Great velocity in the punch as well. It's just a natural shot to him. And, Alexander Vostik, the light heavyweight champion WBC from the Ukraine, he has a similar right hand, a little bit more silkier, sort of smoother. Kell's is a little bit more sort of brute, heavier looking punch, but both of them are very comparable, just magnificent punches both of them possess. So when Shawn Porter, the much shorter fighter, was trying to get inside on Kell Brook being having excellent timing and accuracy, also one of his strongest attributes, he was able to just sort of dip inside and just land that short counter right hand when Shawn was accelerating before Shawn could even throw his own jab. And because Kell Brook is not an inside fighter, then he would immediately smother and tie up Shawn's right hand in particular. And because Kell, being a much bigger and more physical and stronger fighter, he had the physical strength, probably one of the only welterweights, to tie up Shawn and completely neutralize him illegally, let's be clear, on the inside. And then referee would call a break, and then Shawn would have to recommence his attacks. And that was Kell Brook's strategy for the first half of the fight, and he was working. Now, the other fighter who gave Shawn with a similar sort of punch was the Cuban Yordenis Ugas. Whereas Ugas didn't have the ability to sort of smother Shawn on the inside, but he was landing also a very short counter right hand, catching Shawn continuously when he was trying to press forward, trying to accelerate and cut the distance so he could, wing away with his, his aggressive nature in which he has. So although Shawn was getting caught with the first right hand, Ugas wasn't smothering or breaking range to try and re-establish the particular angle in which he could throw the right hand and forcing Shawn to reset. So Shawn was able to retaliate and come back with punches, but then Shawn would disengage and move out and try and box a little bit more. So Shawn had more of an opportunity to retaliate and land and then come back and then change the position of the fight. And I think that is what marginally won Shawn the fight. Ugas wasn't able to really come back with combinations, and that was the problem. Now, that's where Shawn had the advantage in this fight. Now, if he was able to neutralize Errol's jab from long range pretty much the entire fight. Now, Errol was always seen as the better inside fighter, but he had one major disadvantage, and this is why he absolutely did not win the fight. Because Errol, as a southpaw, he did not have a counter short right hand. So when Shawn would try and jab, Errol didn't counterpunch this fight. He didn't have a right hand. He only had the right hook. But at that sort of distance, you're not going to throw a right hook. Because to throw a right hook, it takes a lot longer than to fire compared to a straight right hand. Plus, the leverage of the punch is coming from your right rotator cuff and your hip because you're turning into the punch. So it's the momentum from outside to inside is where the power is generated. Because you can't have a wide stance because Shawn is literally coming forward and on you. And Errol is backing up as well. So he can't use his left foot as the leverage for his right hand. He didn't have it because of his body position. So the only punch that Errol could land was his straight left hand to the body. And what happened in this fight? Over roughly between 30 to 40 illegal blows. Not even borderline low blows, but literally nut shots, in which the telecast were even repeating as well. Now, I don't count illegal blows. So a lot of the people that I've, had some conversations with, not on YouTube, but, ex-fighters and coaches, etc., family members, etc., who watch the fight independently, they also feel the low blows, it's in the region of around 30 to 40. So if you totally deduct 30 to 40 low blows, yeah, and then straight left hands that Errol was landing to Shawn's head, how many of them were behind the ear? Rabbit punches, which are also illegal. So that doesn't leave a great deal of legal punches that Errol landed. Yes, absolutely, he did land clean body shots, certainly in the second half of the fight. Yes, he did land jabs as well. And he did land some right hooks to the body as well. But when you're talking about over 50 illegal blows, and there's no dispute about it, and the referee, he clearly had instructions to tolerate them. Because let's remember Jack Reese, how many fights has he officiated in where he's allowed the A side to get away with murder? Go back and look at the Andre Ward and the Mikhail Kessler fight. The amount of headbutts, elbows Andre Ward used, which literally stopped the fight because of the damage that was done on Mikhail Kessler's face. Numerous cuts. Couldn't see, blood dripping down, so Andre Ward was able to, also land shots. Jack Reese is clearly, absolutely, and always has been a PBC referee. One of their tools to ensure that the A-side fighter, the pay-per-view star, the pound-for-pound star, clearly gets the victory and he moves on because they're investing a lot of time and effort and paying him a tremendous amount of money. Shawn Porter's was, even on the inside, he was able to have just enough head movement which prevented punches from landing flush, and hence they were landing on the back of Shawn Porter's head, behind the ear, which are illegal blows once again. Yet Shawn, despite, remonstrating to the referee did give Errol a couple of warnings, but clearly he should have been deducted points, and at least 1 point. And why that didn't transpire, it's one of the most disgusting examples of officiating that I've seen in years. But Jack Reese was clearly given instructions by Al Heyman and the PBC and Fox Sports to tolerate the gross misconduct, the premeditated fouls from Errol Spence. There is no other explanation for that. So if Errol Spence is not landing clean body shots and he's not landing clean straight left hands which are going to the back of the head, then how do you people account for Errol Spence having an advantage in terms of power punches, whatever, a 44% connect rate in terms of power punches, and an overall advantage in terms of punches landed? CompuBox is a tool for the A side, and it always has been. You've only got to look at the Floyd Mayweather and the Manny Pacquiao fight. Manny Pacquiao was able to take away Floyd Mayweather's jab in that fight, and Floyd Mayweather's shoulder roll, which some of you idiots out there think is like the greatest defensive strategy employed by any fighter. Manny Pacquiao was able to land left hands to Floyd's body at will throughout the fight. It was probably one of the best punches of the fight. And he was able to do it actually through the sort of, it's like if you look at the sort of shape that is created by the shoulder roll, it's like an isosceles triangle sort of with the point down, and Manny was able to land that left hand in that gap, followed by an uppercut. Yet CompuBox was coming up with Floyd landing 21 punches in certain fights. It's just shocking how you people are just infiltrated by, CompuBox, which always has been a tool for the A side, to just manipulate not only the general public but casual fighters as well. Why is CompuBox figures not used by judges if it's such a definitive mechanism? Why is CompuBox figures not audited after a fight? So an invigilator would go back and look at the fight to try and, debunk or corroborate the stats that are compiled. It's never done, because it's not an independent. It's owned. The equipment is owned. The copyright control, the legislation, it's owned by the broadcaster, as it was in HBO in the past. And you've got to look at who the staff members are, who is actually paying the bills for CompuBox, the networks, and who's the network's fighter, who's their A-sider, who's the fighter they're promoting. And it was Errol Spence. So those of you that just rely on CompuBox as your main barometer for scoring a fight, you really need to revise your methodology in terms of watching and scoring fights. Too many of you are influenced by biased commentary. Fox Sports, Sky Sports in the UK, which clearly had an agenda for Errol Spence, because Errol Spence beat Kell Brook. So naturally they're gonna be talking about Errol Spence, because it gives justification for a world-class fighter beating their fighter. So of course they're not exactly going to say Errol Spence is a bum, is he? Because then that would clearly undermine Kell Brook, who is still an active fighter, and contracted to Eddie Hearn, to Sky Sports, who is the exclusive sort of promoter for Sky Sports. Excuse me. Now, why is a low blow illegal? A lot of you don't even know the answer for that as well. What damage does it induce upon a human when you're hit, lower abdomen, when you're hit, on the testicles, the groin area, etc. That causes internal bleeding. It can cause permanent problems to the colon, bowel problems, not to mention the pain in which it induces as well. One of them punches and you could be just completely out of a fight. And that takes at least 20-30 minutes to recover. If you've landed one very, very hard punch to the testicles, it takes a considerable amount of time. Yet Shawn Porter was hurt with over between 30 and 40 of them, never given a 5-minute break to try and recover from any of them. Errol Spence was never deducted a point. So what happened in the second half of the fight? Shawn Porter clearly got a little bit, tired from those low blows. He was worn down. Now Errol Spence was also controlling the head in the fight, pushing the head down and landing, and that's what led to the short left hand, which dropped. Well, it wouldn't even dropped, but Shawn's hand touched the canvas and it was ruled, a knockdown. That's not a case of Errol Spence's power carrying late into the fight. Absolutely not. His power is vastly overrated. That's just a simple case of Shawn Porter being tired, worn down. He put a lot of energy into the fight. Was winning the fight, dominating the fight throughout. Showed that he was the better boxer as well, both at long range and at inside the pocket. Errol Spence couldn't counter. He was being reactionary as opposed to being proactive, waiting, loading up too much on single punches. There was no combination punches, landing illegal blows both to the back of the head and low blows. So Shawn was a little bit worn down, and the 10-8. Now, even if it had not been scored, even if there had been no knockdown in the fight, 116 111, Errol Spence still would have won the fight according to those 100% fabricated, pre-populated scorecards. So Shawn Porter was never going to win the fight. That's why the fight was clearly a robbery. It was 100% fixed so that Errol Spence would prevail if, in the unlikely event that he suffered a knockout. Yeah, it was... Excuse me, I'm still recovering from a flu. Just a shocking, absolutely shocking. What's more shocking, it's not even what transpired. Because those of us who have been familiar to the politics of the PBC and boxing in general, you've only got to look at it early on, the Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury fights. There's just been so many fights. You can give you hundreds and hundreds of fights on the PBC Showtime telecast. So Shawn Porter, I didn't like his saintly sort of Christian resignation after the fight. He was clearly upset and disgusted by the decision. Kenny Porter should have done what John Ruiz, his trainer, used to do back in the day. Complain about the low blows at the point at which they're actually transpiring. Being in the referee's ear as well. But when the fight has clearly been calibrated against you, then it is sometimes futile. But a passive aggressor in that sense, that's not a good look for Shawn. Errol Spence is a hype job, absolutely. Always has been a hype job. And those of you who do not think he's overrated, now let me ask you another question. Does an elite pound-for-pound fighter, in which Errol Spence has been deemed to be so by all of these so-called idiots and whatever the official pound-for-pound lists, now does an elite pound-for-pound fighter struggle against, say, a B+ fighter, somebody like Shawn Porter, who is not considered elite? Does he struggle that badly despite having all of the advantages? No, they don't. Credit to Shawn Porter. As Nas said, me against the world, and that's Shawn Porter. He was not only fighting Al Heyman, Fox Sports, the commentators, Errol Spence, the judges, the commission, the referee, pretty much everybody. And he still won the fight, despite being the recipient of all of those injustices. You've got to give credit to him. What a tremendous fighter he is. And he's a difficult fighter for anybody. But the boxing world is just far too fixated with Errol Spence and Shawn Porter. But it's a very competitive decision. Are you telling me Terence Crawford and Shawn Porter is a foregone conclusion? Terence Crawford, conversely, is also one of the biggest hype jobs going. You've just only got to look at his opposition, and that's the level of confidence that the matchmakers and the promoters have for Terence Crawford. Who was his last fight against? Amir Khan. Amir Khan, a fighter who the boxing community was thought to been shot before the Saul Alvarez fight. What was that? 3-4 years ago? And yet he's fighting Terence Crawford in 2019. And he was landing plenty of punches in that fight. But, you know, and it's pretty ironic as well, you know, Terence Crawford had to put him out with an illegal punch as well. But, yeah, we know Amir Khan checked out of that fight as well. But he was landing, for a shot fighter, he was, for all those Terence Crawford fans, he was landing right hand after right hand, left hooks, jabs, at times, you know, even rocking Terence Crawford's head back as well. You know, so Shawn Porter and Terence Crawford, that's a competitive fight. Danny Garcia and Terence Crawford, that's also a competitive fight. Danny Garcia, who appears to be the next fighter for Errol Spence, you know, the mandatory for the WBC, I think it is, for the third time or whatever he is now. You know, that's also a competitive fight. Because Shawn Porter, he didn't really have the power for all of his dominance. People just judge the fights on the aesthetics. They don't like Shawn Porter's style. They don't like him winging away. So they're just a little bit too influenced by, you know, aesthetics. And that's also wrong as well. You've got to clear your mind when you're scoring the fight. A style is unique to a fighter. It doesn't matter whether his punches are wide or what. As long as they're illegal, it doesn't matter whether, you know, technically or fundamentally you don't think he lands the punches, you know, correctly. It doesn't matter. You know, if he's landing, if his pressure is being rewarded by, you know, punches, head and body punches, even if they're landing on the elbows, whatever, it's slowly, you know, breaking him down. You know, you've got to give that fighter, you know, his respects, and you've got to reward him. But nah, too many people are just brainwashed within the community. They don't understand the rules of boxing. And they certainly don't understand the politics of boxing and the blatant corruption that is. It's pervasive. It's at a level now which, because it's correlated to the money within the sport. Now, if fighters are earning £8-9 million, you've only got to look at the betting odds to know that a fight is going to be, it's going to be fixed in one fighter's favour. It's just so clear. You can't hedge your play anymore. You're better off even just taking that 8-1, you know, putting down $1,000 or whatever and walking away with an easy $150, $200. That's probably the better way of making money now. Just try and profit if you can from the wide odds. I'm not sure whether I have any more interest left in the welterweight division. Manny Pacquiao is clearly the anomaly. When I was talking a little bit before about southpaw fighters who don't have the counter right hook, Manny Pacquiao does have it, and he does have it at short range, which Errol Spence clearly does not. It's because Manny Pacquiao's hand speed is significantly quicker. It's the speed which generates, you know, the power as well for him. So he's able to whip that punch. There's a lot more disguise on the punch as well. And that's how he got Ricky Hatton in that fight, that infamous Manila Rice punch, which took Hatton out. I think it was in the first round as well. But he landed that fight at will as well on Chris Algieri, in particular on Jesse Vargas as well. But he used 2 counter punches in that. He was parrying. He parries with his right glove and he comes back with the straight counter left hand. He goes one way and goes the other. You know, and that's how you beat Errol Spence as well. And Shawn Porter was doing a little bit of that as well. And Manny's other counter, you know, go one way with an orthodox fighter who's jabbing, go to his left, then come back, switch to his right, and whenever Manny comes to the right, he'd fire that Manila Rice punch, and he could fire it with the elbow actually in front of his shoulder, or he can fire it with the elbow out. So he fires it from 2 angles, so hard to read, and it's so fast. And you know, that took out a very good fighter at the time in Ricky Hatton, before Manny knocked him out brutally with the left hand. And it was very much due to that counter right hand that Ricky Hatton was afraid of, that he was almost waiting for, before Manny came back with that huge left hand, which still one of the best knockouts I've ever seen. Losing my train of thought now. I'm sort of going from fight to fight, back and forth, retrospective to current. But yeah, not a lot more to say on this fight. Disgusted, both on the undercard and the main fight. David Benavidez and Anthony Durrell. That was also a disgusting fight as well. So predictable, you know, the 3 fights that we saw. A very easy night to profit upon if you understand how much the PBC fighters, the fighters who have upside, and David Benavidez is a very young super middleweight. What is he, 22, 23, against a veteran Durrell, who never defended his belt when he held it the first time, but clearly wins the shot after that debacle with Avni Yildirim. And did he really win that fight as well? No need to answer, it was rhetorical. I really hope they make the Manny Pacquiao and Errol Spence fight. I think Manny Pacquiao is infinitely on different levels. And this is a 40-year-old Manny Pacquiao as well. I think he's better than anybody in the welterweight division. It's pretty ironic, isn't it, that most people have Errol Spence pound for pound number 1. Sorry, have Terence Crawford pound for pound number 1, but he's clearly not even the best fighter at welterweight where he fights. So how is that not a contradiction? Anyway, I think I've said pretty much enough. I may do a follow-up video once I've thought about there's something else I wanted to talk about, but I don't seem to recall what it was. But in any case, I hope I've given you some proper justification as to why the fight clearly was a robbery, irrespective of the knockdown. And if you deduct all of the illegal blows, Shawn Porter absolutely wins the fight, because I don't score any of those punches. I'm sorry, and nor should you, and nor should the judges. It's interesting that, you know, Teddy Atlas and whoever he does the podcast with, you know, they were watching the fight real time with no commentary on, and both of them scored the fight a draw, and they were pretty disgusted with the decision, you know, 116, 11. And they both mentioned, you know, the low blows, etc. in the fight as well. So it just goes to show you, you know, when you're not influenced and you're watching the fight with an objective, neutral mind, then it's a very different fight. You know, clear your mind, clear your agenda, clear your fanboyism. Watch and appreciate the fight for what it is. Know the rules of the fight and apply all of those mechanics, and the outcome will be very different. And this fight very much reminded me of the Floyd Mayweather and the Manny Pacquiao fight, which that fight was definitely a robbery. Absolutely. That wasn't even a close fight at all. Manny Pacquiao clearly, absolutely won that fight. And Shawn Porter absolutely won this fight as well. So, those are my thoughts. Now, those are the facts. Simple, those are the facts. Because most of you don't even have an opinion that is even worth even listening to. But for those of you who know your boxing, and I know all you guys out there that do and come on my channel and sort of interact me on the various podcasts I do, I'd be more than happy to listen from you guys, you know, Shepherd and McGregor and Pound for Pound Boxing Report and all you Fight Scouts and Aziz and all of you guys, the BDA boxing community, and Gonzalo, Johnny Boys, Matrix. So yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments field. And even, you know, Del Boy and Lee Thornton, all of you good guys who know your stuff, Nordic boxing, Sean Newton as well, Thunderdome, Duck, all you guys. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. Please put them down in the comments field. I'll definitely try and get back, and hopefully I'll see you for the next one. We'll do the Golovkin fight as well. I'll try and definitely be a lot more forthcoming with regular videos. So corruption in boxing.